Millennials, generally defined as the generation born between the early 1980s and the early 2000s, frequently hear that they're the most narcissistic, entitled generation of all time.
Ringtones and vibrations are part of the fabric of society. Our country is teeming with cell phones.
It's rampant. It's definitely epidemic.
Tampa-based behavioral therapist Scott Hinton helps people overcome all sorts of addictions. One that's on the rise has to do with something almost every one of us keeps close: a cell phone.
It's right in your hand. It's immediate. It's convenient.
Anderson tells 8 on your side, 18 to 35-year-olds are most consumed by cell phones. Some are obsessed, as hooked on checking their phone as some people are on alcohol or drugs. Anderson explains that social media sites, easily accessible by the swipe of a finger, help people feel better about themselves. It's a feeling they can't let go.
It really fulfills voids and needs of people these days.
According to a study by Pew Research Center, 67% of cell phone users admitted to looking at their phones when it didn't even ring or vibrate. The average cell phone user checks the phone 35 times a day. 61% of cell phone users admit they sleep with their cell phones under their pillow or next to their bed. 51% explain they check their phones during vacations.
It's the world we live in now. We have every kind of information, in our hands, so it's very easy to be distracted by it.
But for some people, it's more than a habit. It's an addiction just like any other.
I go to a lot of restaurants and I see people on their phone not talking to their spouse.
Of course, not everyone who checks their phone at dinner is addicted, but Anderson still sees it as a serious problem. Cell phones are keeping spouses, family members, and friends from talking to one another and from experiencing life.
I believe it is unraveling the social fabric of our society in that we're not having the human experience.
The Houston suburb of Sugar Land has a new bronze statue of 2 girls taking a selfie. Oh, gosh.
Oh, wow.
It's part of a 10-piece collection recently placed around the town, but this is the one that's causing a stir.
Yeah, some social media critics question. They question the message that it sends or why the town actually spent public money on it. The cultural arts manager says it shows a common activity in the public square and that it was donated.
Was Ellen just being Ellen?
Andy, Lupita. All right. Okay, wait.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, good. Wait,
A superstar selfie gone wild that turned into tweet-tastic history. And with more than 2 million retweets, smashed the Twitter record set by President Obama.
The mother, identified only as Xiao, is seen staring at her phone while her 4-year-old boy struggles just feet away. When Xiao realized her son was missing, he had already drowned. With the help of pool staff, she searched for him for about an hour. His body was eventually found at the bottom of the pool. We've seen instances like this before in China. In October, a 2-year-old girl was killed by an SUV while her mom was looking at her phone in Hunan province. Anger over these deaths hits an underlying concern in China over the country's obsession with smartphones.
Popular culture is more vulgar, vapid, self-absorbed, hedonistic, and dehumanizing than at any other time in living memory. Culture is supposed to be uplifting. It's supposed to infuse our lives with intrigue, lust for knowledge, and appreciation of beauty. Instead, for the past 2 decades, pop culture has only served as a sewer pipe of projectile diarrhea aimed directly at our gawping mouths. By its very definition, popular culture has always been mass-produced for mass consumption. But over the last 20 years, as I'm sure you've noticed, pop culture has become significantly more vacuous and obscene. It's a rancid assault on the senses. Why is popular culture so contrived, plastic, empty, meaningless, grotesque, and incredibly retarded? Because from the 20th century onwards, post-modernist, moral relativist, critical theory espousing, cultural, Marxist, nihilists began to seize control of society. Postmodernism seeks to erase the distinction between high culture and popular culture. They want to turn everything on its head. In simple terms, postmodernists have sought to reshape society in their image. And that's why everything's so ugly. From architecture to art to music to entertainment, they're making everything hideous. The goal? to completely undermine the foundation of Western civilization and leave us open to subversion and capitulation. Look at television. TV's endless portrayal of broken families, emasculated male figures, and aberrant, nihilistic, droog-like youths. The stars of so-called reality television are virtually always narcissistic, amoral, and borderline insane. They have no redeeming traits, indoctrinating us with the idea that this is actual reality, that this is how we should act too.
You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube, you eat like the tube, you raise your children like the tube, you even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs!
In the decadent late stages of a society, bizarre behaviour proliferates and is legitimized by the dominant culture. They're fetishizing pathology. We're even seeing the mainstreaming of paedophilia by the news and entertainment media. Salon.com giving a platform to a wannabe child molester. Articles that legitimize watching child porn. A new Fox show that shows a transgender 6-year-old wearing a sadomasochistic ball gag. This is all intended to drag us down into the gutter.
The literal and figurative images of wealth are gradually changing, and some of the newest members of the world's billionaire club are ever younger. In fact, a new report from private wealth consultancy WealthX lists the top 11 wealthiest individuals under the age of 35, revealing some fascinating facts. 3 of those worked at Facebook and 7 of them live in the US, and get this, 3 of the top 11 are women. Here are the 5 wealthiest people on the planet under 35. Number 5 is 32-year-old Scott Daniel Duncan, heir to Dan L. Duncan, who is co-founder of Enterprise Products Company, the largest publicly traded energy partnership. The younger Duncan has a net worth of $5 billion and is also American. Number 4 is 33-year-old Eduardo Savrin with a net worth of $5.3 billion. A Brazilian who lives in Singapore, he's a co-founder of Facebook. 34-year-old Yang Huiyan of China is number 3, and she's worth $5.9 billion. Her wealth is inherited as the daughter of Chinese real estate mogul Yang Guoqiang. 31-year-old Dustin Moskovitz is number 2, with a net worth of $9.3 billion. He's an American and was Facebook's 3rd employee. And number 1 probably doesn't come as a surprise, although his level of wealth just might be more than you thought. 31-year-old American Facebook co-founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg is worth $41.6 billion. And there are also some other millennials whose names you might recognize. They haven't quite made the list, but they're not too far off. 25-year-old Evan Spiegel is the CEO of Snapchat with a net worth of $1.9 billion. And Snapchat co-founder Bobby Murphy is only 26, and he already has an estimated fortune of $1.8 billion.
Showed in his work on evolution and natural selection is that we don't need to invoke any supernatural force or power to account for the development of life through time on Earth.
The ongoing processes that are observable in today's world.
Do you think it's a belief?
I think it's just fact.
I think more like facts.
There is too much evidence to ignore.
Do you think it's a belief?
No, it's science.
It's the way it happened.
It's logical.
You know, all the scientists pretty much agree with it.
It's more of a fact.
When did you start to believe?
When I started to think for myself.
When did you start believing?
When I took my first biology class.
It all started to make a lot of sense. The teacher made it very, very easy to understand. I generally trust the scientific community. Makes more sense than any religion or anything. The fossils they found of all the cavemen, the Homo sapiens, the dinosaurs, it shows clear evidence.
I believe in science.
The secret origins of CERN are nefarious to the core.
Sergio Bertolucci, the science director at CERN, admits that they're trying to open a doorway to a parallel reality, and they hope that something unknown unknowns, he calls them, will come through it. And CERN was built right over Apolliacum, where the ancients believed the doorway to Abaddon and the bottomless pit exists.
Is the bottomless pit from Revelation chapter 9 about to open?
Technology today is being developed so that we can communicate with extra-dimensional entities.
The ancient conspiracy at the center of CERN's most secretive mission.
Their research is very likely being used to advance a hidden agenda, the conspirators of which are well aware of who created the universe and are absolutely intent on making war with him and enthroning another in his place. CERN is an acronym derived from the French rendition of the designation European Council for Nuclear Research, which was a provisional council organized in the early 1950s with critical backing from the United Nations, whose task was to plan for the construction of a multinational European research facility that would be dedicated to the study and advancement of nuclear physics. On the 29th of September 1954, the Provisional Council was dissolved and the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN, was born. As an interesting side note, the infamous Bilderberg Group was also conceived that same year, exactly 4 months later, on the 29th of May. Both of these organizations enjoy diplomatic immunity. Although the Provisional Council had been dissolved, paradoxically, the acronym of CERN remained, even though it did not correspond to the title of the new organization. It was distinguished physicist and one of the key pioneers of quantum mechanics, Werner Karl Heisenberg, who had inexplicably insisted that the original acronym of CERN remain in effect, as Tom Horn elucidates in his book, On the Path of the Immortals. Werner Heisenberg understood quite well what quantum physics implied for humanity. Inherent within this theoretical realm, populated by obtuse equations and pipe-smoking scientists, lies what I call the Babylon potential. This is the secret knowledge, the scientific imperative, informed and driven by spiritual advisors, that the Bible cites as the key to opening a gateway for the gods. It is Ente Menaki, Baba Alu, the opening of the Abzu, the doorway to hell. Tom goes on to explain that, although Heisenberg may or may not have known it, CERN is an abbreviated title for an ancient Celtic deity called Cernunnos. Cernunnos, whose name means horned one, is thought to be the god of death and rebirth and the lord of the underworld. He is often depicted with rings or torques around his stag-like horns or in his hands, which may symbolize the circle of destruction and restoration that he represents. To further concretize this idea, Cernunnos is also depicted with a ring in one hand and a snake in the other. Because of the cycle by which it sheds its skin, the snake has ever been a mystical motif of death and rebirth, destruction and restoration. In a reversed esoteric adaptation, the rings of the Large Hadron Collider could be representative of the rings of Cernunnos, and by further associative interpretation, may very well reveal CERN's prime esoteric objective. I believe it does, and will address it at the end of this analysis. I understand that drawing correlations between the acronym of CERN and deities from the ancient world may seem too forced and tenuous for critical minds, and I might be inclined to agree, if CERN had not evoked such correlations first. Rather than distance themselves from associations with arcane pagan deities, the directors of CERN welcomed and even celebrated the placement of a very unscientific icon in the courtyard of their main facilities. On the 18th of June 2004, a 2-meter-high statue, bequeathed by the representatives of India's Department of Atomic Energy, was ceremoniously unveiled at CERN. It was a statue of the Hindu god Shiva, engaged in the Nataraja, the cosmic dance of destruction. Shiva is one of three members of the Trimurti, the Hindu Trinity, in which the cosmic functions of creation, preservation, and destruction are personified in the forms of Brahma the Creator, Vishnu the Preserver, and Shiva the Destroyer, who is also known as the Transformer. It is important to understand that in Hindu mythology, Lord Shiva destroys the world in order to renew, restore, and reconstitute it. A commemorative plaque positioned next to the likeness of the dancing Shiva emblazons a quote from Austrian-born American physicist Fritjof Capra. It reads, in part, "Hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series of bronzes. In our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics." Think about this, says Steve Quayle in his book True Legends. A symbolic statue of what might be a fallen angel who promises to destroy things as we know them now and rebuild a new, improved universe, with a plaque basically saying the facility will be trying to unify mythology, religion, and physics. Skeptics will be quick to point out that the unifying of ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics is only metaphorically represented in the dance of Shiva and has no practical application in the scientific activities of CERN. Again, I might be inclined to agree, except for the fact that CERN has been deliberately encouraging the coalescence of mythology, art, and physics in very bizarre ways. In 2014, a dance opera entitled Symmetry was performed and filmed at the CERN facilities, including inside of the Large Hadron Collider. Directed by filmmaker Ruben Van Leer and featuring the voice of American soprano Claren McFadden, Symmetry was a collaborative project involving not only choreographers and dancers from the production team, but many of CERN's own scientists. Once again, rather than distance themselves from arcane and mythological associations, the scientists at CERN embraced this highly esoteric and occult-laced production. One could spend hours breaking down all of the deliberate esoteric insinuations in the trailer for the film alone. But in the interest of time, let me just point out one of the more obvious details. The name of the film's protagonist is Lucas, which also happens to be the actual name of the Slovakian dancer and choreographer who plays him. Without plunging too deeply into etymological roots, the name Lucas means bringer of light, and is in fact a derivation of the Latin term Lucifer. Of course, all of this could be purely coincidental, but given the overtly esoteric nature of the film, it is highly unlikely that the name of the main character is a consequence of happenstance, regardless of the filmmaker's intention. The truth is that the occult, art, and science have always been fundamentally entwined. The natural synthesis or symmetry that binds them is perhaps best illustrated in one man, Sir Francis Bacon. Bacon, who is widely considered to be the father of modern science and the primary proponent of the scientific method, which is the very underpinning of CERN, was himself an occultist, artist, and scientist. In fact, there is reason to believe that Francis Bacon is the true face behind the dubious mask of William Shakespeare. There is, in truth, no incongruity between the material and the metaphysical world, the physical and the spiritual. They are merely two sides of the same coin, both essential parts of the whole. When one penetrates deeply enough into what we call physics, one discovers, inevitably, the veil that separates these two realities. Occultists have always been aware of this fact. Even to Francis Bacon and his scientific contemporaries, many of whom were members of the mystery schools, deciphering the mechanisms of the material world was but the means to a far more important objective: to make contact with the entities lurking on the other side of the veil. This veil is often described as a dimensional doorway that allows access into realms beyond the perceivable world. The concept of unperceivable dimensions existing essentially in the same space we physically occupy is not only very probable, but also very widely accepted in the scientific community.
People are part of the Satanic Church and they are worshiping Satan through abortion and like the whole abortion agenda. That's crazy to even be saying.
Before they used to do witch hunts and burning at the stake. Now, they're doing it little by little, taking away reproductive rights. So it is our duty to worship through activism. That is the key to the Satanic Temple, what differentiates us from other Satanists.
So I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking, well, she's not really really into satanic worship. She's not actually really for real a Satanist, right? I mean, actually, Satan?
Right here, right now, we're standing up for tyranny. We're standing up for women's rights, LGBT rights, for everybody's rights. Let us embrace the Luciferian impulse to eat of the tree of knowledge.
To invoke Satan is to reach out without reservation and to eat from the tree of knowledge.
Blasphemy for the sake of blasphemy! Hail Satan.
Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
It really is amazing to think about. Man, this is the kind of thing that you would read about in the history in the Bible. You have a satanic priestess, part of the Satanic Temple, that's involved in propagating abortion. That's part of making sure that culture embraces this. And she does it as a part of her worship, as a part of her religion. That this is in a sense, blood sacrifice of children. And it's overt, it's out there, it's on her sleeves.
Hail Satan!
And it really, we're finding, isn't uncommon to find people who are a part of the Satanic Temple or involved in active satanic worship to be avid Planned Parenthood supporters and activists. As a matter of fact, our local death escort, the person who actually encourages the women coming in for the abortion and escorts them to the front door, offers solace and encouragement, our local death escort is also involved in satanic worship. This is an Instagram photo of her offering supposedly a blood sacrifice, and that was actually the Satanic Cross. And this is a pentagram. And here is her with a picture that says, "Destroy your life for Satan." And this is an interesting picture with some abortion tools and a baby in a jar. And the first thing that pops up when you put her name into Google is her active engagement in forums for Satan. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. Is this really happening right now? So the thing is abortion is fundamentally religious. Some people engage in abortions for peace. They offer their child as a sacrifice to get peace. Some people, obviously, Satanists, may even engage in abortion and the propagation of the message of abortion to actually practice Satanism and be involved in satanic worship.
I will ascend into heaven. The war began in Eden when the dragon, known as Nakash, lured Adam and Eve into sinning with the lie. Ye shall be as gods. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Soon, humans multiplied upon the earth, and rather than worship God, they fell down at the feet of dragons. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. But it wasn't enough for the dragons. They wanted to do more than just own mankind. They wanted to destroy them, to forever keep them from re-entering the divine council. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. The war raged on, where fallen angels descended onto mountaintops, spreading fear and false doctrine. It is a war for the souls of men, and only a Savior's blood could change the outcome. I will be like the Most High. Satan and his minions go by many names and wear many faces, but their strategy has always been to imitate God's truth.
We are gathered here to celebrate the spirit of humanity in the dawn of a new American era. In a season when many commemorate the birth of Christ, we commemorate our own Genesis, the enlightenment of all humanity, a revelation of our nature as written in the annals of history, a gift from Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star, and the rebel. We are Satanists. We engender moral, spiritual, and sexual freedom, personal independence, and insist upon personal choice in all things. We care for the significance of the individual spirit and personal moral responsibility. If you stand here today and embrace your nature, are free-thinking, self-governed, and godless, you too are a Satanist in the eyes of many in your own community, including those who represent you in your government. We are also Americans. We are seeking collaborators, individuals who are visionary satanic alliance, leaders of the new American era. And it is time to awaken. Do you want to be part of a sleeping world?
No!
Do you want to gorge on the drug of the commonplace?
No!
Will you forever remain addicted to the oppressive traditions of a counterfeit morality?
No!
Well, we must tell those people who represent us. As we stand on the crossroads of history, let us confront the blind and self-righteous, the persecutors of thought and reason. Let us rise up in celebration of our satanic nature and cast our chains into the dust of hell. The word of God has been evoked time and time again to justify the opposition to civil rights movements, to squash women's liberation. We have to do more when women are denied access to reproductive health care and vilified as murderers. To represent them in the government. Satanic America has heard your call to action. If religion is to lead in areas which have traditionally been left to a secular democracy, we will do our duty too, to bring the insights of our satanic practice to the State House, to the courthouse, to schools, and of course, homes and businesses of America.
Authorities in northern Italy say more than 1,000 turtle doves have dropped dead over the past 5 days. It's the latest in a series of unexplained, sudden death incidents affecting creatures in the sky and underwater. The events have sparked a media frenzy, with doomsday speculators saying it hails the end of the world. But is there really something fishy going on, or is it being overhyped? Artist Katrina Zarva reports.
Sing a song of suspense, one where the end is nigh, as thousands of blackbirds fell out of the sky. And when the birds were found, the news began to sing. The end of days conspiracy does have a catchy ring. At first, it was just Arkansas grabbing the world's attention. Then, Louisiana followed suit, and Europe ruffled some feathers with mysterious avian deaths in Sweden.
Up to 100 birds have been found dead in a Swedish street, just days after thousands of birds inexplicably dropped out of the sky in the United States. Fireworks, the cold weather, even poisoning have all been blamed for the deaths, but the experts remain baffled. Here's our science correspondent, Julian Rush.
First America, now Sweden. 100 or so jackdaws dead in the snow in the small town of Falköping. It's as if Christmas had come again for aficionados of the mysterious and irrational.
The only sign of damage was where they'd been run over. They looked like they were in some kind of shock. Everywhere you looked, they'd fallen out of trees.
But at the risk of disappointing conspiracy theorists, mass die-offs of birds like this in Louisiana on Monday morning are surprisingly common. The US Geological Survey lists 90 such incidents in America in the last 6 months of last year, 5 involving more than 1,000 birds.
The bodies of as many as 40 birds fell to the ground, and investigators are trying to figure out quickly what is going on. Bill Shields is live tonight in Dorchester. Bill?
And this is really bizarre because residents in this nice little neighborhood near Upham's Corner came out this morning and they found dead birds or lethargic birds around, and not just any kind. There weren't sparrows or pigeons. There were only grackles. So with City Inspectional Services, the Animal Rescue League of Boston, trying to figure out what's going on around here.
People in several Lancaster County communities are finding dead birds.
News 8's Lancaster County reporter Caitlin Smith has more on what may have killed them.
A neighborhood that invites birds in wants to know what wiped hundreds of them out.
I think it was coming out maybe to get the newspaper, and he thought, well, he stepped on something, he thought it was a leaf.
The dead birds lined Dana Shannon's sidewalk and driveway on Magnolia Drive in Leola.
Just kind of grossed out.
Now they're in her backyard.
Probably about a dozen birds buried.
The same yard where her 2 young children play.
This one here was certainly unusual. It's a significant event. If it is something that involves any kind of illegal or unlawful activity, we need to know about it.
But Wildlife Conservation Officer Greg Graham doesn't think that's the case, and Thursday he found more evidence to support that.
Here we are 2 miles away from that other location. It's not going to be a pesticide disease event.
In this neighborhood,
1, 2, 3.
there are just as many dead birds,
4, 5.
if not more.
I'm sure if we walk around here, we're going to find more dead birds.
Thousands of dead fish have washed up on Adelaide's southern beaches. Experts believe the recent hot spell has caused the massive kill-off in our Gulf waters.
It's Adelaide's turn. Little leather jackets litter the shore, just like Eyre Peninsula beaches earlier this month. Locals have observed them from Christie's Beach south to Maslands.
Never seen it before and not sure why.
Yeah, wondering about what the cause is.
Bit nasty. I'm glad it's not really hot because they'd smell.
Experts believe the recent hot patch is to blame.
Any sort of sudden rise in temperature really affects these small body fish.
They suspect most of the fish are from the same batch killed on the west coast. Gulf fishermen have been floating amongst them.
And the last catch of snapper he got, they were all full of little leather jackets.
Some Adelaide surfers want the water tested, saying they've been forced out with stinging eyes.
Yeah, this is the 3rd largest mass stranding that we've recorded in our history, and so it's a very large one. Logistically, it's a massive undertaking.
Well, there's a mystery in the waters off Nova Scotia. There is growing concern about thousands of sea creatures washing up dead on their shores. CTV's Alan Apra joins us now with more. Alan.
Yes, Marie, thousands of dead fish and other marine life have been washing up ashore on a beach in southwest Nova Scotia, leaving local residents confused and concerned. Residents of Plimpton, a small coastal community in Digby County, say they have been finding dead herring on the beach for more than a month, but recently other marine life has started appearing ashore.
We started finding starfish, crabs, we found flounder, we found ocean perch, and then yesterday we started finding scallops on the beach. Nice big scallops, and everything's dead. We'd like to know what's going on.
It's just really sad just to see, starfish, just hundreds of starfish, and the shellfish. I used to go clamming all the time when I was down here, and I grew up on the beaches. So just to come to your hometown and just see just so much death on the beach is really sad.
Over 200,000 saigas. They're a small endangered species of antelope. They have that distinctive snout. They're dying off in record numbers. This is more than half of the entire antelope's population. Scientists are not sure exactly why the species is dying off in such huge numbers.
The sudden deaths of tens of thousands of endangered antelopes in Kazakhstan over the past 2 weeks have left scientists scrambling for answers and conservationists worried about the animals' future. More than 120,000 rare saiga antelopes, more than a third of the total global population, have been wiped out in a devastating blow that the United Nations Environment Programme has called catastrophic. Scientists are struggling to put their finger on the exact nature of the disease that has felled entire herds, but say findings point towards an infectious disease caused by various bacteria.
Now to the town of Seffner, Florida, near Tampa, where last night the earth opened up, as it does increasingly and thousands of times every year in this country. This time it swallowed a 37-year-old man as he slept in his home. Our report tonight from NBC's Gabe Gutierrez.
In his bed 1 minute, gone the next.
All I see was the tops of his bed.
Jeremy Bush says he heard a loud crash, then his brother Jeffrey screaming late last night at their home near Tampa. He jumped into the massive hole in a desperate attempt to rescue his brother.
And I couldn't get him. All I could hear was, I thought I could hear him screaming for me and hollering for me to help him. I couldn't do nothing.
Remarkably, outside, the house looks like nothing happened, but inside.
The open hole is about 30 feet in diameter, and it's about 20 feet deep.
While sinkholes like these in Ohio, Minnesota, Utah, and this one in Guatemala often grab headlines, they are most often reported in these 7 states: Texas, Alabama, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and they're especially common in Florida, where more than 15,000 sinkholes have been recorded. Last May, this huge hole swallowed an entire backyard near Orlando. Last June, another destroyed an entire home. While experts say many things can cause them, in Florida it's a domino effect. The state's sandy soil, on top of clay, supported on a deep layer of limestone, can suddenly collapse due to a dramatic shift in Florida's unique underground rivers.
Florida essentially sits on a system of caverns that are filled with water to some degree, and as that water moves up and down, it erodes those caverns, and from time to time they collapse.
Back near Tampa, engineers are trying to explain what happened here, trapping a man in his own home without warning.
Well, dating is out, hookups are in. I'm speaking in great generality. I'm on some campuses, maybe some people date, but for the most part, dating is something that Grandpa did. And on college campuses today, it's a hookup culture. That is these random, rapidly forming physical interactions that for which there's no further contact anticipated. Kids only see 2 other options on college campuses these days, which is to be a friend with benefits, which looks great on paper, and as I pointed out before, communism looks good on paper too. That never works out for anybody. Or to get joined at the hip in these rapidly developing boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. But the organizing property of college campuses is the hookup culture. And the other thing about hookups that intrigues me is it's always intoxicated. Always intoxicated. Got to be loaded to do it. It's such a cool thing.
The hookup culture on college campuses, sex with no attachments, which some psychologists say has largely replaced dating on a lot of campuses. And while that might sound great to some, psychologists say that hooking up can be not quite as carefree as it sounds. We got together a group of college students here in our studios to talk to them. They spoke bluntly and bravely about the routine of having sex first, and then maybe you get to know each other sometime after. What they said was very revealing. Watch. Do you like this kind of lifestyle, or do you wish it was different?
I'm not happy about it. I just feel as though people are in it just for the sex, and nobody's really taking the time to get to know each other anymore. So I feel like that's pretty much dead.
So is the idea that that's not happening, that dating is dead, as Kiyama said, is that true or not true?
I agree that you might perceive it as dead. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think sometimes we put it on a hierarchy of, oh, sex has to mean something to you, when if it doesn't and you're just want to have sex, that's okay.
Does anybody feel like they would like more romance? They would like to be courted? You're like, yes, I would. Go ahead.
I think that the romance is still there, but I think it's a little dying out right now. Nowadays, romance is just like, hey, let's go for a coffee date. And, oh, if we hook up, we hook up.
How do you feel the next day after this happens and you see that person on campus? Are you supposed to you're supposed to just be cool about it and pretend like you don't really know each other?
If you run into someone that you did sleep with the night before, you're able to talk to them as though you're still friends. There can be that romantic level to it, but we are in a sense sexually liberated.
It's easy to scrutinize us. We kind of have this window into our lifestyles because we have all of these new media ways for people to look at and see kind of what we're doing.
You're an atheist?
I am definitely an atheist, yes.
Now, why are you an atheist?
Why am I an atheist? Because there is no God.
Atheism assumes that you can disprove the existence of a God. Agnostic is a more correct term, but I'm an atheist.
Are you an atheist?
Yeah.
I am an atheist, yeah.
I am, yes.
I am.
So you're not an atheist?
No, I'm not.
So you're leaning that way because of evolution?
Yeah.
I don't believe in there's a guy in the sky that lives in the sky.
Arguably, one of the most commonly discussed natural signs in the end days is the dramatic increase of earthquakes around the world, something that in geological time would be statistically unprecedented if it were actually happening during what many believe is the last generation.
That in the last days there'd be an increase in great earthquakes. Jesus used verbiage that means bigger earthquakes in unusual places. We're looking at things regarding, for example, greater hurricanes, greater typhoons, things that in nature you can sense that things are coming undone. And yet, if you looked at it naturally, you would say, well, this is due to global warming, or this is due to man's bad stewardship of the earth. But yet the Bible said as we approached the end, this is exactly what we would see, which, by the way, that preempts man's involvement.
The scriptures do tell us that earthquakes, specifically earthquakes, will increase in frequency and in intensity.
But wait a minute. Hasn't the U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS, gone on record to state that this is not occurring, that no such increase in earthquakes have been detected around the world?
Because this is such a debated topic, the USGS gave a press release saying that this was not occurring. As a result, we actually decided to take the USGS data, millions of data points, spent months downloading it, analyzing it, graphing it, studying it. The results were absolutely terrifying.
Despite what you may have heard in the past, this is the compiled data from the USGS from over the last 100 years. Keep in mind that we're not talking about the millions of microtremors that can now be detected from the distribution of more numerous and sensitive sensors, but strictly data from the larger earthquakes that can be felt by people beginning at 6.3 and up on the Richter scale that could be easily detected by early 19th century sensors from virtually anywhere in the world. This data shows what the USGS and other organizations do not want you to see.
It shows that the earthquakes are increasing in intensity and they are increasing in frequency. This is exactly the description that was prophesied.
I cannot help asking those who have caused this situation, do you realize now what you've done?
We know year by year what's going to happen, and they know we know. It's only you that they tell these fables and you buy it and spread it to the citizens of your countries. Your people do not feel a sense of the impending danger. This is what worries me. How do you not understand that the world is being pulled in an irreversible direction? That is the problem. But they pretend like nothing's going on. I don't even know how to get through to you people anymore.
It was worse than the Cold War era. That's how bad relationships have gotten. Well, this might have a lot to do with why NATO is in a frenzy throughout Europe right now. You're looking on the screen and behind you here, Russia's develops hypersonic 4,600 mile per hour Zircon missile. They tested this just the other day, or actually, excuse me, they tested this last year back in July, but the race to develop an unstoppable, unbeatable weapon capable of defeating all military defense systems in the world is getting much too close for comfort, according to the article here on Fox News' Tech Report. says according to the multiple reports, Russia is expected to begin production soon on its 3M-22 Zircon, a hypersonic missile that will travel 4,600 miles per hour, 5 times the speed of sound, and will have a range of 250 miles. That's just 3 minutes and 15 seconds from launch to impact. It's already a major standoff right now over in Europe with Kaliningrad right now, and the United States definitely deploying more and more military hardware within striking distance of Kaliningrad, and of course Kaliningrad carrying the Iskander missile system with nuclear-capable warheads of a 500-kilometer range all the way to Germany and even to Paris, France.
2016 has witnessed a sharp escalation in the militarization of the South China Sea. The cause of the escalation is multifaceted and comes from both regional and international quarters. The militarization has been initiated and exacerbated by both China and the United States, both bearing responsibility for the current level of tension in the region. The USS John C. Stennis Carrier Strike Group sailed to the region from its home port in Bremerton, Washington on January 15th and passed through the Luzon Strait separating Taiwan and the Philippines on March the 1st. The Stennis is accompanied by the guided missile cruisers, the USS Antietam and the USS Mobile Bay, as well as the guided missile destroyers USS Stockdale and USS Chung Hoon. The Antietam is based at Yokosuka, Japan, and was ordered off its normal patrol to join the Carrier Strike Group. The 7th Fleet flagship, the USS Blue Ridge, is also in the area, having docked in Manila on March the 4th. Trilateral talks were held on board the Blue Ridge on March the 5th between the US Navy, Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces, and the Philippine Navy. The key subject of discussion was how the three nations can work together to confront China in the South China Sea, promote security and stability in the region, and develop future multilateral training and exercises.
Right now in South Sudan, children are dying of hunger. Conflict combined with drought across East Africa are leading to what looks like the greatest humanitarian disaster that we've seen since World War II. Crops have failed, livestock are dying, rivers are dry, families are selling everything that they have to try and release funds to feed their children. The scale of the disaster is truly catastrophic.
Close to 20 million people in 3 African countries and Yemen are at risk of starvation. The UN Secretary General says more than $4 billion is needed within the next 3 weeks, or many more will die. Antonio Guterres made an emergency visit to Somalia, where a national disaster has been declared because of drought. About half of the country's population faces severe food shortages. In South Sudan, famine has been declared in parts of the country. Up to 1 million people there will soon run out of food. And the UN says 400,000 Nigerian children face malnutrition. Close to 80,000 of them might not survive the next few months. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on rich countries to help. Let's take a look at what's led to the desperation in affected African countries. Somalia hasn't seen rain in months. Compounding the effects of the dry spell is that people have been unable to grow food. The country has been battling an insurgency for more than a decade. In South Sudan, war broke out in 2013. Since then, millions have been forced to leave their fertile land and seek safety in makeshift camps. The northeast part of Nigeria has also experienced violence. Since 2009, the armed group Boko Haram has been active in the region. Villages have been burnt to the ground and people left with no means of feeding themselves.
At the local solid waste dump, operations manager Cesar Zanuga watches as trucks roll in every day to dump produce destined for a nearby landfill.
We got a whole load pretty much of loose organic lettuce. You know, we've got spinach towards the back. Looks like it's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with it. We got some kale here. We got broccoli in the back as well. We have plenty of produce to make a salad here.
The greens in this landfill are from local farms, and sometimes they end up here because something goes wrong during the packaging process. Another reason perfectly good food gets wasted, Peter Lehner from the Natural Resources Defense Council explains.
Right now, food that isn't sold to your
best buyer is often dumped in the landfill. The prices for fresh fruits and vegetables can go up and down quite a bit, and farmers may plant thinking they'll get one price, but by the time harvest comes around, there's another price, and it's not even worth it for them to get to the market.
A report by the Natural Resources Defense Council says that as much as 40% of all the food produced in the United States never gets eaten.
The idea that almost half of our food is wasted is crazy.
1975, Sweden decided to welcome immigration. Since 1975, violent crime in Sweden has increased by 300%, and rape has increased by 1,472%. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called for no limits on incoming refugees, while British MP Owen Paterson estimates 3.6 million refugees will have entered Germany by 2020. And after receiving a German passport, refugees will be able to move freely around the EU. And in France, 21st century French culture is being replaced in some areas by 7th century dogma. Meanwhile, France saw a 17% rise in car arson over the New Year's holiday. The London Telegraph reports, despite this, New Year's Eve went off without any major incident. The Interior Ministry insisted in a statement, adding that there were only a few troubles with public order. Although refugee numbers in France have swelled by 20%, deportations have dropped equally by 20%. It's clear that the invasion has reached unsustainable levels. France is just one European example that there is a war underway. March 11th through the 22nd of 2012, Mohammed Merah shot 7, including 3 children. Knife attacks by radical jihadists in 2013 and 2014, injuring a French soldier and 3 police officers. 2 separate vehicle attacks in December of 2014, injuring 21 and killing 1. January 7th through the 9th of 2015, the Charlie Hebdo attacks and a related hostage situation, killing 17 and injuring 22. June 2015, a jihadist delivery driver beheads a man and then attempts to blow up the building with a van. August 21st, 2015, a Moroccan jihadist attempted a mass killing on a train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris, but was subdued by 2 Frenchmen and 3 U.S. soldiers. November 13th and 14th, the worst terror attack in French history. Hollande declares the shootings, hostage-taking, and suicide bombing an act of war. 130 are killed and 352 are injured. January 2016, a jihadist rams his car into 4 French soldiers, injuring 2. June 13th, 2016, a jihadist stabs a police officer and his wife in their home, killing them both. July 14th, 2016, a Tunisian jihadist kills 86 and injures 434 with a truck in Nice, France during Bastille Day celebrations. July 19th, 2016, a jihadist injures a family of 4 at a French holiday restaurant for not wearing suitable clothing. July 26th, 2016, 2 jihadists attacked a church during Mass, killing the priest. August 19th, 2016, a rabbi is stabbed by a jihadist. August 30th, 2016, a policeman wounded in a melee attack at a police station because the assailant said it represents France. September 2nd, 2016, a jihadist attacks a nurse and a policewoman and is shot dead by another police officer. September 4th, 2016, 2 jihadists attacked an author and his son. The author had written a book entitled Jihad. The victims were called filthy whites as they were beaten. Yet the totality and outcome of this invisible war continues to be normalized.
A protest has turned violent at the University of California, Berkeley. The editor of the conservative news website Breitbart and Trump supporter Milo Yiannopoulos was due to give a speech against sanctuary campuses for undocumented students.
It's horrible. It's disgusting what's going on right now. It's one thing to protest someone's right to come here and speak, but it's another thing to create this much amount of destruction and violence and hurt and harm to other people.
I just came to see if I could get into the Milo event. I support free speech, and it just got shut down by a bunch of people in black bloc, protester masks.
Now, activists smashed windows, including a building where Yiannopoulos was supposed to give the speech. The rioters, some masked in black, used baseball bats and stones to destroy property. Police declared a lockdown across the campus and used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the crowds. Twitter users are posting pictures of Trump supporters being beaten and attacked with pepper spray.
Sounding the alarm about nightmare superbugs in our hospitals, now in 42 states, highly contagious, deadly, and drug-resistant. We'll have the new warning tonight. We now turn to health news tonight. New and extremely dangerous super germs that are showing up in hospitals across this country, other healthcare facilities, prompting some strong and alarming language from the CDC. We get our report tonight from our chief medical editor, Dr. Nancy Snyderman.
It's a silent threat lurking inside our nation's hospitals, a deadly class of superbugs that's nearly impossible to treat.
It's resistant to virtually all antibiotics. So when an individual gets this microbe and it invades the blood or invades tissue, curing them becomes very difficult.
And these bacteria are deadly, with a fatality rate approaching 50%. 42 states, 4% of short-stay hospitals, and 18% of long-term acute care facilities have reported problems.
A health worker fumigates the grounds of a temple in central Bangkok. With 21 new Zika cases in the Thai capital, authorities are keen to be seen taking action. But trying to exterminate the mosquitoes that carry the disease in a damp, tropical and overcrowded city is virtually impossible.
It's all very well trying to fumigate selected parts of Bangkok, but we're in the middle of rainy season at the moment, and every night there's a huge deluge, leaving standing water all across this city, combined with hot, humid conditions, and it's the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes.
A record number of poultry has been culled in a record amount of time as Korea battles its worst avian influenza outbreak ever. According to data released by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, as of midnight Wednesday, the number of chickens and ducks that have already been culled or are set to be slaughtered is more than 20 million, or 12.6% of the country's entire poultry population. The avian influenza virus has been confirmed at 222 poultry farms nationwide since the season's first reported case of bird flu 35 days ago.
A University of Connecticut professor says a society could collapse in the 2020s due to increasing social unrest. Peter Turchin is an evolutionary anthropologist whose latest book is called Ages of Discord, a structural demographic analysis of American history. He's a leader in the field of cliodynamics, which analyzes historical events like a science using predictions and models. And using a model that tracks a number of factors, he predicts that social instability and political violence will peak in the 2020s. One of those factors is elite overproduction, where society's elite population grows larger and more distant than the poor.
Venezuela, a country descending into chaos. In the midst of the worsening economic crisis, the police aren't being paid and lootings are becoming increasingly desperate. Now citizen militias make the law and street lynching is common.
It's very rare to see widespread looting in Mexico, but the attacks on supermarkets and gas stations over the last couple of days are a clear sign of the outrage over the hike in petrol prices. In one of the worst cases, all the supermarkets in this street in Ecatepec were emptied.
In their thousands, these protesters packed Paris' Place de la République. They carried banners demanding justice and dignity for victims of police brutality and condemning what they say is state-sanctioned racism.
Nous sommes en plein état d'urgence, et cet état d'urgence...
We are under the status of a state of emergency.
There's only one way to reach Wat Kun Summit Chin. The Buddhist temple is now an island. Once it was the centre of a thriving village on Thailand's central coast, but the rest of Samut Chin has been drowned by the sea. Homes and farms have disappeared as sea levels have risen. Electricity poles poke out of the water where the road used to be. Old video shows homes being broken up by the waves and the temple awash. Today, a handful of monks still live here, keeping the temple alive as a place of worship.
There used to be a school in front of the temple, but it was destroyed by the rising water. The people who lived here moved away, but the temple can't move, so we stayed here in the middle of the sea.
Coastal areas in the US have a problem. They're right next to the ocean. Those oceans have been rising since we started keeping track. Thanks to the changing climate, they're expected to keep rising by anywhere from 8 inches to more than 6 feet in the next century. Now oceanfront communities have to figure out how to keep the waters at bay. It could be as easy as rebuilding beaches. New Jersey and Florida have refilled sand on their coastlines for decades. New sand every few years can keep erosion in check and protect seaside buildings. Other projects are more permanent and more expensive. It cost $14.5 billion to rebuild New Orleans levees after Katrina. New York City is spending big on a planned 10-foot barrier that will wrap around most of lower Manhattan. And in some cases, federal and state governments step in and buy a buffer against storm surges. After Hurricane Sandy, New York and New Jersey bought out damaged homes along the coast and turned them into open space. Some experts think the US might need to do something even more drastic in the future, like moving further inland away from swamped coasts. But it won't happen soon. Nearly 40% of the US lives in coastal counties, and the share is climbing right along with the sea level.
Don't freak out, but there's a giant hole in the sun. A hole so big it could swallow 50 Earths, and it's letting solar wind loose into space at tremendous speeds.
Tonight, the night sky will provide a spectacle you won't want to miss. In a rare convergence of elements, a prenumbral lunar eclipse, a full snow moon, and a comet will all be on full display in most parts of the world. First up is the eclipse, which will present itself as a darkening of the moon as it passes through the weakest part of the Earth's shadow. Prime viewing is at 4:43 p.m. Pacific Time and will dissipate until it completes. Comet 45P is next, and although it's been visible through telescopes for weeks now, it will be at its closest point the morning of February 11th. You won't be able to see it with the naked eye, but should see it in the constellation of Hercules through either binoculars or a telescope.
This is Moore's Law. On a log chart, you see that computer power doubles every 18 months. Now, what does that mean? This means that when you get a birthday card in the mail, you open it up, and there's a chip in it, and the chip sings, "Happy birthday to you." Well, that chip has more computer power than all the Allied forces of 1945. Hitler, Eisenhower, Churchill would have killed to get that chip. And what do you do with that chip? You throw it away in the garbage. Or look at this chart. You'll see that way back in the 1960s, NASA had almost no computer power. Your cell phone today, one cell phone today, has more computer power, according to this chart, than all of NASA when they put 2 men on the moon. This means that if cars obeyed Moore's Law, cars today would cost 10 cents. This means that when you park the car, you wouldn't even bother to put a quarter in the meter. The meter costs more than the car. So you wouldn't have to just park the car and walk away from it. So what does this mean? This means that by 2020, computer chips will cost about a penny. That's the cost of scrap paper. So we now know the future of the computer. The future of the computer will be everywhere and nowhere, hidden in the walls, hidden in the fabric of our life, just like electricity is, everywhere and nowhere. And this is the internet. We wrote the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web was written by a physicist to keep track of subatomic particles. And you can see here that the internet corresponds to prosperity. Where there is the internet, there's prosperity, there's commerce, science, finance. Where there's no internet, there's poverty. So one thing that we physicists do is we create something and then we simply give it away for free. So how will you communicate with the internet in the future? These are glasses that have full internet capability. You can download any website, any movie, do emails from these things, and they will also recognize people's faces. How many times have you bumped into somebody on the street and you say to yourself, who is this person? Jim, John, Jake, I know this person. In the future, your glasses will say, it's Jim, stupid, remember? You met him last week. Do you want to see his entire biography for you in your glasses? And let's say you're at a cocktail party. You're looking for a job, and you don't know who the heavy hitters are. In the future, you will know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. Well, let's say you don't want to look like a refugee from Star Trek. In the future, glasses will be fashionable with full internet capability. They can be flashed directly into the retina of your eye. They can be flashed right onto the screen of your glasses, or used as like a jeweler's lens as an attachment to your glasses. Fashion models will be wearing these things. Young people will demand to have full internet capability. Any video, any movie, any website, any music, downloaded via your glasses. Now you may say to yourself, wait a minute. Maybe I don't wear glasses. No problem. In the future, they'll be in your contact lenses. These are internet contact lenses that we physicists are trying to build. Imagine taking a final examination. Ha! Immediately the light bulbs begin to flash, right? Think of taking a final examination. You realize that in the future, professors are going to have to throw out their final exam because you can't simply record memorization on a final exam anymore. You'll have to convey concepts, principles, rather than memorizing the names of the crystals or the shapes of the minerals or whatever. Imagine full internet capability in your glasses. Well, we physicists are working on this even as we speak. Imagine, for example, going to a foreign country. You bump into somebody and they start to talk to you in a foreign language. No problem. In the future, you will see subtitles. Subtitles of a foreign language in your contact lens. And let's say you visit the ruins of Rome. It's such a big disappointment. You read about the great Roman Empire, and then you see all that's left, almost nothing left of the empire. You go to the Roman Forum, and you only use imagination, thinking of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony at the Roman Forum. No problem. Your contact lens will recreate the full animation of the height of the Roman Empire as you walk through the ruins.
When it comes to vehicles, 88% of American households have a car. While that's a fairly high number, Italian households lead the countries polled in this category with 89%. The next three on the list are Germany with 85%, France 83%, and South Korea 83%. The research organization notes that the data doesn't necessarily indicate the extent to which the survey respondents use these cars, but just that they have at least one working car. For bicycle ownership, Germany was again one of the leaders with 80%, reporting that they have one, followed by Japan at 78% and Thailand at 74%. While the US was lower on this list, the data suggests that the 53% of households that do possess a bicycle do so more for recreational purposes rather than as a means to get to work. The survey includes less than 50 nations around the globe, and certain countries such as the Netherlands and Denmark may have fared well, but were not amongst the ones polled. The survey also covered motorcycle ownership, with households in Thailand at 87% and the ones in Vietnam at 86% leading the list.
My name is Andre. I am your tour guide. The war is finished and it's very safe. And you can see a lot of groups are coming to the country. And there are groups from all over the world, and especially from USA. And we are standing exactly outside the western wall and the Dome of the Rock. And you see here a lot of groups in the country. and this group is from USA. You can pass, it's okay, you can pass. And it's very safe to come to Israel nowadays. Yes, there was war, it was in Gaza, and that war finished. And it's very safe to be in the Holy Land. And anything happened was in the south, far away from Jerusalem. And actually, we had a lot of groups in the country during the war, and they enjoyed it so much because in Jerusalem it was very quiet. The media make it so bad. When you look at the media, all the news channels, you think that the war was in Jerusalem. This is totally wrong. The war was so far in the south. And now things are getting back to normal, and a lot of groups are coming to visit the Holy Land.
Is it safe to travel in Israel? The first thing that people ask me when they are planning their trip to Israel is if it is safe, and the answer is very, very short. Yes, traveling to Israel is safe. When you will float in the Dead Sea or lie on the beach of Tel Aviv or just walk here in Jerusalem, you will feel safe. Some tourists, mainly from the US, told me they feel safer here than in their hometowns. And it's not just me that is saying that. The Ministry of Tourism does surveys and asks the tourists what they like, what they didn't like in Israel, and personal safety was very, very high.
More than 400,000 Israelis live in Judea and Samaria, an area much of the world calls the West Bank or occupied territories. Israel argues the land is not occupied but disputed because it was never a modern country and its status has never been resolved. In 1967, Israel took back this area known as the Biblical Heartland in the Six-Day War.
It wasn't just about a victory in a war. This was a return to our roots.
This is the modern-day community of Beit El. Established in 1977, it's home to some 6,500 Israelis. It's in the same area and named after its biblical ancestor Beit El, also known as Bethel, the house of God.
4,000 years ago, the Bible says Jacob dreamed of a ladder to heaven, and God appeared to him and promised him the land of Israel to him and his descendants.
Settling the land wasn't easy. It was barren and rocky. Initially, the government didn't approve, but Israelis from all sides of the political and religious spectrum supported the idea.
And I believe then almost the entire population of Israel was with us.
The first settlement was Kfar Etzion, first established in 1927, some 20 years before the State of Israel. Arabs destroyed Kfar Etzion 3 times over the years. The 1948 siege led to the evacuation of women and children and an eventual massacre of the fighters left behind. The young evacuees, like Jerry Katz, never lost the hope they would one day return. The government allowed them to do so in 1967.
The head of News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch, spoke today about Israel's future. News Corp is the parent company of this network. Hours ago, at a conference here in New York, News Corp's chairman and CEO Rupert Murdoch said people have now started to notice that Israel is an excellent place to invest.
In the 21st century, the path to global competitiveness runs through Israel. That's where the returns are. And I believe there are even bigger things to come.
Israel has managed to avoid the economic fallout of ongoing unrest both at home and across its borders. According to the World Bank, Israel's gross domestic product grew to $242 billion in 2011. One of its key drivers of growth is technology. It's got its own version of Silicon Valley, known as Silicon Wadi, where many international tech companies operate. In fact, high-tech products account for about 40% of the country's exports. The IMF predicts growth of 3.6% this year and just under 4% in 2014.
86 Israeli companies are traded on NASDAQ, the third country following the USA and China. According to the World Bank, Israel's gross domestic product, GDP, surged from $3 billion in 1960 and $132 billion in 2000 to $296 billion in 2015. And Israel's GDP per capita almost tripled from 13,500 in 2000 to 35,500 in 2015.
In the course of human history, there are certain time-locked truths that God releases at strategic intervals when they are most needed and profitable for the generation at hand.
We all know of God, Satan, angels, and demons, but is there more to the unseen realm than that? Scripture alludes to a divine council, sons of God, and other confusing concepts. And why do we just skim over these scriptures? I was a PhD student in biblical Hebrew studies. I had read every word in scripture, but I had never seen it. One Sunday morning, a colleague of mine handed me a Hebrew Bible, open to Psalm 82, and said, "Here, read this closely." God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. God in the midst of other gods? That sounded heretical at first. But this concept showed up in Genesis, Deuteronomy, the Gospels, and Revelation. I discovered it in the works of trusted scholars. I just couldn't ignore it. What is the unseen realm? Could understanding it bring light to confusing passages? Could it clarify some unclear concepts in the Bible and even help us understand Jesus' mission better? These questions fueled a 15-year journey into researching what the ancient Israelites believed about the unseen realm.
I like to think of it this way. If we had an ancient Israelite sitting with us here in the room, and we asked each other and we asked that fellow, what does this or that passage mean? How do you read it? What goes off in your head when you read these words? His answer is going to be a lot different than what our answer would be, especially when we're in some text that we think is either really strange or odd or just plain weird or even scary because of the supernatural presuppositions behind it. That's what I want readers to get.
Scholars, because of the rationalistic Western mindset, are detached from talking about these things and tend either not to see them or tend to try and play them down or are not sure what to do with them.
I just think of Exodus chapter 12, verse 12, where on the eve before the death of the firstborn, God announces to Israel, on this night I will have victory over the gods of Egypt. Gods there is being used to refer to those spiritual powers that are supportive of Egypt. They are real. They're not God like Yahweh. They're not his peers. God created them too, and elsewhere we might use the language of angel or demon.
What Unseen Realm does is help people understand that the world of Scripture is a real world, and it can give us a way to bring these together under the rubric of a God who's created a spiritual realm as well as a physical realm.
The origin of secret societies and how they are controlled. And we saw that they originate from Babylon, which gave rise to Kabbalism and also to Islamic secret societies, the Ismailis, the Qarmatites, the Fatimites, the Druzes, and the Assassins, which we haven't dealt with as such. Out of Kabbalism eventually came Gnosticism, which replaces Jesus Christ with a universal Messiah, who today is called the Cosmic Christ. And this Cosmic Christ has none of the attributes of the Jesus Christ of the Bible, but in order to make him acceptable to the world, everybody will have to accept him. That means Jesus Christ, even amongst Christians, will have to be brought lower to a level of this cosmic Christ to accommodate all others who want to be his equal. According to Eliphas Levi, Gnosticism was founded by Simon Magus, who was a sorcerer and put on a cloak of Christianity. He was the one who had himself baptized, but he was rebuked by Peter for wanting to buy the Holy Spirit. So a cloak of Christianity covered Gnosticism. Out of this philosophy, eventually it became formalized, and the Knights Templars, within a large religious system, were the harborers of the ancient philosophy. In other words, they were the harborers of the secret of Gnosticism. They had very close ties with the Islamic societies, and eventually we saw that the Knights Templars were suppressed by the King of France. Many of them escaped, however, to Spain, where the king in Spain gave them his protection, and they flourished further, and their rites and rituals and degrees were perpetuated in subsequent organizations. So the Templars never really died other than in name. The Templar secret knowledge was kept alive in an inner circle in Rosicrucianism and overseen by the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order then created Freemasonry, as we saw on Sunday, and Freemasonry is the so-called Protestant arm, if you like, although it's not only a Protestant arm, it is an international arm to bring about those changes which are necessary to set up this dark kingdom. So tonight we're going to have a look at Freemasonry and look behind the scenes as to what it really entails. Because most Freemasons, like in all secret societies, are fully unaware of what happens behind the scenes. You will remember that Gary H. Carr, in his work En Route to Global Occupation, gave a very similar expose. He also takes it through Kabbalism, Gnosticism to the Knights Templars. Then he misses out on the Jesuit connection, which is the military powerful arm controlling all these things. And he has Freemasonry control Marxism, American European secret political societies, international banking elite, and then, scarily, the World Council of Churches. Now, this is not me saying this is this man, and he is no small fish. And Theosophical societies, together with many cults, then constitute what is known as the New Age movement.
Helena Blavatsky. She is an occultist and a spiritualist from the 19th century who has been called the mother of the New Age and the mother of modern spirituality because of how far-reaching her impact has been on the New Age movement. She co-founded the Theosophical Society, which taught and published esoteric material pertaining to theosophy. Theosophy, according to Wikipedia, refers to systems of esoteric philosophy concerning or seeking direct knowledge of presumed mysteries of being and nature, particularly concerning the nature of divinity. Theosophy is considered a part of a broader field of esotericism, referring to hidden knowledge or wisdom that offers the individual enlightenment and salvation. The society taught everything you could possibly imagine that could fall under the umbrella of the New Age, and really gave rise to the entire New Age movement. As New Religious Movements research specialist from the University of California, Dr. J. Gordon Melton said, "No single organization or movement has contributed so many components to the New Age movement as the Theosophical Society. It has been the major force in the dissemination of occult literature in the West in the 20th century." He has also said, "Madame Blavatsky stands out as the fountainhead of modern occult thought, and was either the originator and or popularizer of many of the ideas and terms which have a century later been assembled within the New Age movement." The Theosophical Society, which she co-founded, has been a major advocate of occult philosophy in the West and the single most important avenue of Eastern teaching to the West. So she was the major player in the popularization of New Age subjects. She would teach on things like ascended masters, ancient mythology, Hermeticism, Hinduism, mysticism, scientism, astrology, sacred math, esoteric knowledge, chakras, Atlantis, Kabbalah, and every other New Age topic. Between 1887 and 1997, over 2,800 journals were published in the theosophical magazine she started called Lucifer. Yes, that's right. The mother of modern spirituality published her journals in her magazine, Lucifer. Helena Blavatsky herself calls Lucifer Satan. In fact, in Volume 2 of her primary work, The Secret Doctrine, she glorifies and praises Satan well over 100 times, calling him the one true God and the savior of humanity. Satan is the anointed cherub of old. God created Satan, the fairest and wisest of all his creatures in this part of his universe, and made him prince of the world and of the power of the air. Thus, Satan, being perfect in wisdom and beauty, his vast empire is our Earth, if not the whole solar system. Certainly, no other angelic power of greater or even equal dignity has been revealed to us. The ideas and themes of the New Age are the exact same ideas taught in spiritual Satanism, and that should be concerning to some of us. And these are the same ideas that were taught by Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, advocated along a satanic philosophy, and are the very ideas that Anton LaVey accused the New Age of stealing from the devil.
The more we explore, the more we dig, the more we unearth, the more we discover that the biblical narrative is true. A fact that the Luciferian liege lords of this present age are determined to keep secret at all costs. The existence of giants not only confirms the general narrative of the Bible, but specifically the events recorded in the first verses of Genesis 6 concerning the hybrid offspring of fallen angels. A reality that not only the Smithsonian, but even most theological seminaries across the United States would like to ignore. Did you know that there once existed an ancient race of red-haired cannibalistic giants inhabiting the Americas? If you are familiar with the work of men such as Steve Quayle, then the answer to this question is undoubtedly yes, and you are well informed. However, if your worldview is primarily a product of public schooling, or a credulous concoction of mainstream news, then the information of this analysis and its forthcoming episodes may be shocking to you, as you may discover that much of what you think you know about the world in which you live is poppycock. The problem is that we have all been sold a bill of goods concerning the ancient history of not only North America, but the entire planet. We have all been suckered, swindled out of the truth by fast-talking, credential-toting intellectuals who, like Kirby vacuum salesmen, have jammed their foot into the door and hustled their way into our homes, cramming their cockamamie theories and absurd postulations down our throats through television programming and public education. It is no wonder, then, that the undeniable evidence of giants in North America has been largely ignored and even covered up. That there were giants in America is a fact no honest archaeologist can dispute. Their bones and the remnants of their ancient culture are scattered across the landscape of the United States, often situated right under the unsuspecting nose of a quiet suburban town or even a sprawling metropolis. As Americans, we have been taught to look across the seas for evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, when in reality, the very same evidences are to be found just as bountifully within the confines of our own shores. Contrary to our educational programming, the red-skinned native peoples were not the first to inhabit North America. There were, residing in the land before them, according to their own records and legends, an assorted race of monstrous giants, among other humanoid entities. Many of these giants were not only over 15 feet tall, but had red or blonde hair and beards, elongated skulls, double rows of teeth, and 6 instead of 5 digits on their hands and feet. The Native American tribes were terrified and often terrorized by the 6-fingered giants, and still tell tales of their infamy to this day. It is said in their legends that some of the cannibalistic clans of giants would hunt them down like wild animals and devour their flesh, even while they were still alive. The natives' ubiquitous custom of raising the hand when approaching one another trivialized in Hollywood films, was instituted by them for very good reason. 6 fingers was a universal sign of malevolence and an indication that you were not of ordinary human stock. Buffalo Bill Cody famously recorded in his autobiography that while scouting in the sandhills of the Niobrara country, the Pawnee Indians brought into camp some very large bones, one of which the surgeon of the expedition pronounced to be the thigh bone of a human being. The Indians said the bones were those of a race of people who long had lived in that country. They said these people were 3 times the size of a man of the present day, and that they were so swift and strong that they could run by the side of a buffalo, and taking the animal in one arm, could tear off a leg and eat it as they ran. Many such tales abound in the traditions of the Native American peoples. Even if the details of some of the legends concerning giants have been embellished over time, the physical evidence of their enormous bones testifies to the truth of their existence and gives credence to the stories.
But how will God's people, the remnant, prevail over the principalities of darkness during the final showdown between heaven and hell? Though hell may have its directive, heaven has its imperative. Increasing evidence from around the globe of miracles, healings, and prophetic visions indicate that God is already raising up an army of believers for the greatest awakening yet.